The news hounds are trying to drive a wedge between us. Harry Truman. Useful as a former president like Hoover could be to a rookie chief executive, a future president's star power proved just as valuable. In 1945, 1 month after Truman turned to Hoover for help, he made the acquaintance of the hero of Western civilization, General Dwight David Eisenhower, who was every bit as revered as Hoover had been reviled. In those two men, Truman found the allies who would help him shape the post-war world. Like millions of his countrymen, when Eisenhower heard the news of Harry Truman's sudden vault into the presidency upon Roosevelt's death in April 1945, he admitted that he went to bed depressed and sad. It was nothing personal. He had never met the vice president, and Eisenhower had not been one of Roosevelt's pets. But to him and the other generals, this seemed to us to be a most critical time to be forced to change national leaders. He knew better than most people the weight that was about to fall on Truman's shoulders, the new threats rising, even as a great enemy was finally routed. Just a few weeks later, Eisenhower was accepting the German surrender in a small red-brick schoolhouse in northeastern France. The signal, Winston Churchill said, for the greatest outburst of joy in the history of mankind. And on June 18, 1945, Truman gave thousands of government employees the afternoon off, so they could burst out themselves and greet the Supreme Commander of what was being called the greatest victory in the history of warfare. 1 million people jammed the hot flag-wrapped streets of Washington, hung from windows, perched in trees to watch the parade and celebrate at last. Eisenhower arrived in a 4-engine Skymaster at Washington's National Airport, where Mamie waited for the husband she had seen only once in the last 3 years. He ran down the steps, caught her in his arms and kissed her. 20 bands played. Dozens of fighter planes and bombers flew overhead in escort as the parade made its way through the Capitol. A rush and storm of joy swept the city, the New York Times marveled. "Stand up so they can see you," urged General George Marshall. So he stood in his jeep as it moved down Pennsylvania Avenue, his arms raised, delighted, embarrassed, his grin almost wider than his face. "Isn't he handsome?" said a voice in the crowd. "He waved at me. He's marvelous." Ike arrived at the Capitol to address a joint session of Congress, the Cabinet, ambassadors, and the justices of the Supreme Court, as though he were delivering his first State of the Union, only to an audience far more worshipful than any president of either party had ever faced. Yet every wave and bow, he insisted again and again, he made only as a representative of the 3 million soldiers he commanded. "They who earned your commendation should properly be here to receive it," he said, "but I am nevertheless proud and honored to be your agent in conveying it to them." And the chamber erupted in a great rolling cheer. The U.S. liked what it saw. Time swooned. A kindly, common-sense man, a warrior who remembered that he was a citizen, a son of the Middle West, unhardened by war, unspoiled by fame. That afternoon, the towering hero of the age would meet for the first time the little haberdasher. That was not an easy day for the rookie president. "I have to decide Japanese strategy," Truman wrote in his diary the night before. "That is my hardest decision to date." He met with his war cabinet to discuss the costs of mounting an invasion of the Japanese home islands, and the chance that more than 250,000 U.S. soldiers and many more Japanese civilians would die, unless fate intervened. "We are approaching an experiment with the atom explosion," Truman recorded. "I was informed that event would take place within a possible 30 days. At least the other war was over, and Truman, almost a bystander on a day of adulation, got to thank Eisenhower personally. In a ceremony on the White House lawn, Truman added a second oak leaf cluster to the general's Distinguished Service Medal.